thank you for joining us. Our topic for this program is Defying Black Stereotypes. My name is Enola Aird, and I'm your moderator for this discussion. Carter G. Woodson, the father of the annual celebration of Black History Month, believed that knowing our history was the key to progress for Black people. But he also believed that knowing our history is not enough. In his eye-opening book, The Miseducation of the Negro, Woodson said that when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to send him to the back door. He will go there without being told. Woodson knew that as a people, we needed to clear our minds of the toxic beliefs, the stereotypes that are part and parcel of the myth of Black inferiority, the lies that were told centuries ago to justify the enslavement and dehumanization of African people. The celebration of Black History Month, therefore, is about more than facts and dates. It's also about overcoming the negative stereotypes that control our thinking. In this conversation, we'll explore the stereotypes that are still controlling Black people's thinking and keeping Black children from being all that they can be. And most importantly, we will explore strategies for overcoming these stereotypes once and for all. Our guests are Eric Clemens, the Executive Director of LEAP, Leadership, Education, and Athletics in Partnership. Eric is a New Haven resident, husband, and father of 4 beautiful daughters. Camille Cooper is the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Development for the School Development Program at the Yale Child Study Center. And Randall Horton is the author of The Definition of Place and the Lingua Franca of 9th Street and a lecturer at the University of New Haven. We want to get right into this conversation. I want to start with you, Camille. What, in your view, are the stereotypes that are keeping Black children from reaching their full potential?
Well, I'm an educator, and the stereotype that really is problematic for me, or the one that really seems to be the most challenging, is this concept of young people thinking that in order to succeed academically, that's acting white. And it's keeping a lot of young people from really fulfilling their potential because they want to keep their identity with their friends or maybe some street identification. But that ideal of if I succeed academically, I'm trying to act white.
How widespread is that?
Well, I think that it may occur more so in integrated schools that, you know, there's a lot of pressure for young people, and it's something that I just say it's holding young people back from really fulfilling their potential.
Eric?
Yeah. Given my position at LEAP, I think dealing with the children that we deal with from the neighborhoods that they live in, I think the biggest stereotype is the belief that they can be no more than what they see. That what their surroundings are, where their community is, what they see every day, that is the end of the road. And if that isn't success, then they are bound to fail. So that is probably the biggest stereotype for me, dealing with the children that I deal with.
It reminds me of the Entezaki piece, My Universe is 4 blocks wide or something.
Yeah,
very,
exactly.
Very limited universe.
Exactly.
Randall?
For me, I would say one of the stereotypes or one of the myths is that you don't have to know your history, or you don't have to understand where you come from in order to get where you have to be. A lot of times I come across kids who really don't understand the history from which they come from, and I think that sort of like stymies them in terms of, you know, going forward and sort of like making their mark in the world. And I think, you know, I'm always an advocate of that. In order to, like, you know, get to this other place where we're trying to be, we have to understand the erasure that took place in our society, you know. And so I would say that's one of the biggest things that's holding kids back, is that they don't want to go back, or they think that they don't have to. They've been told that they don't have to, or they've been given these sort of indicators that they don't have to understand their history. And I think that that's holding them back, you know, greatly. So.
One of my not favorite, but the ones that I find most troubling are the sort of preoccupation with certain kind of looks, the good hair. It's Chris Rock's new movie, recent movie, that explored that issue. Unfortunately, still very timely. There's a lot of conversation still about good hair and light skin being preferable. I think that tends to hold people back a lot, because when you look in the mirror and you don't necessarily meet that stereotype, that affects how you feel about yourself going out into the world every single day.
Well, I think a lot of young African American women, they suffer from that stereotype because even though there are more images of African American women in movies and magazines, but there still is this struggle about what is the standard of beauty.
When we talk about these images, even within the African American women, or these images which you see on TV, they still subscribe to this sort of standard of sort of like this white beauty. When we talk about body weight, texture of the hair, of dress, and so we don't necessarily see the true image. The true image. Where's the true image? And I think that's being held back. So.
Well, even in terms of community and the aesthetic of community and what is beauty, some of our children at LEAP sometimes struggle with, where they live and what they see as beautiful, and is it possible to have grass as opposed to asphalt? So that as well, when you talk about looks, it's not just the physical look of a person, but it's the aesthetic of where they live that defines beauty and ugly.
I just picked up this book a couple of weeks ago, Brainwashed. It's a new book by an advertising executive named Tom Burrell, and he uses his perspective as an advertiser to describe what happened to the black community as a brainwashing to convince us that pretty much everything that is us is less than. This was done to justify the system of slavery it was a very economically smart move to do. So you convince these people of their own inferiority in every way, the way they look, the way they think. They're not as valuable, not as lovable, not as capable, not as beautiful, not as smart as us. Therefore, we can justify subjugating them and dehumanizing them for our purposes. The problem with that was that after slavery ended, after Jim Crow ended, the myth of black inferiority just kind of stayed with us. And one of the things I find fascinating is that we've done in the 40 years since the official end of segregation, just tremendous things. But it's all been with the weight of this myth, the weight of these stereotypes on our shoulders, which is why we think it's so important to have a conversation about how we rid ourselves of them once and for all. Let's talk a little bit about, are there any other myths that we want to get out there and put on the table?
Well, I will say there are myths, stereotypes, or myths, and we talk about young males and sort of how they have to act in society. When we start talking about the whole, you have to put on this mask, or sort of like, I want to flip what Du Bois talks about, double consciousness, and sort of like this whole thing where you have to be hard, or you have to have this sort of inner core, and you can't see the vulnerability, or you can't let that side of you out. And so I think that holds a lot of kids back, because it's the perception of, this is how I have to act, this is how I have to be, because this whole image and this whole way has been commodified in a certain way that it means that it is successful, and so and it makes money, and so I have to be that way. But and I think that's just something that sort of like puts them behind the 8 ball in terms of their own self-growth, but in terms of community as well. We don't have that nurturing community. We need to have it.
We all have to be so strong.
Right.
We are strong. That's what we're supposed to be, so that we can't feel. If you're so strong, you can't stop to feel what you're really going through. But you're human.
Right. It seems like there's a shift that we've always had to be strong, and that the strength at one point in time was the strength to fight against discrimination and segregation, and the strength was there. Now it seems like it's shifted so that there's a kind of a counter culture, and they're holding up this strength, resisting against the majority culture, but it's in a way that is keeping them from really being able to take advantage of a lot of opportunities.
It's sort of like an internal struggle within their own,
Right.
within their own self, within their own
Well,
self.
I always look at it as the redefining of courage. You know, it's much easier to, as a one who sires a child, to leave your family or leave your wife or whomever you had the child with, and act tough on the streets. But the real courageous thing, I think, is to stay home, no matter how much money you don't have, and take care of that family. So it's a redefinition, I think, of courage and what we think is being brave. You know, being brave is staying home and doing what you're supposed to do, as opposed to being in the street and acting tough.
So in order to get to the really important question, which is, what do we do to defy these stereotypes? I wanted to spend a couple of seconds, couple of minutes on what is the harm with these stereotypes, if any? What is the harm, if any, that these stereotypes?
Well, you know, I think that we are all suffering because these young people are not reaching their potential. I think that they've got lots of skills, abilities, and without them really developing fully, we aren't able to take advantage of that. I mean, they could be physicians, they could be engineers, they may have ideas on how we can combat the economic downturn. You know, all of those kinds of things, I think that it's locked in them, and because of their experiences, they may see things a little differently, and they may see a way to make change. Like, we haven't always had cars. We haven't always had electricity harness so that we can utilize it. Those were ideas that came out of someone's mind, and I think that that potential's there.
Yeah, I would say also that I would agree that it's sort of like stymies progress, but it also creates sort of like a strangulation within the culture itself. So that there's an internal turmoil that's going on that isn't allowing it to realize its potential, but also to be free. To be free, eventually we're talking about ridding ourselves of all these things, but we can't, because we're going to always, going back to Du Bois, is going to be, when you do these stereotypes, you're still looking at yourself through someone else's eyes. And so, that's a couple of the dangers that I see.
I agree with all of that, and to even go further, I think that if you and Ola did not reach your potential or tried to be the best you could be, then I wouldn't be sitting here with you. Because as you become the best you can be, it makes me or inspires me to do so as well. And when we have people or young people who are not reaching their potential, it affects. It's almost infectious. It affects the community in a way where others aren't inspired to reach their potential, thus extinguishing and diminishing the hope.
Right, but then who's going to reach the hand back if no one's able to reach their potential? There has to be some linkage and some mentorship, and so we just, you further, cutting off the mentorship possibilities as time progresses. So there's
Absolutely.
A lot of harm going on.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're having this conversation in the Obama era. I mean, we have a black president, a black first lady, we have Oprah, we have all this stuff. It's the best of times, and but there's this unfinished business. There's this unfinished business that we need to take care of. I think that a lot of the harm we see in the violence, the epidemic of violence in our community. What explains the way that the carelessness with which young people treat themselves and each other. I think, as a mother, that's one of the most powerful and sort of poignant concerns that I have. And also, how come, in the light of all this loss, our community is not just incensed? Why have we become so desensitized to this loss of life?
Well, it may have something to do with this brainwashing that, that the book is about. But I think that, young people develop over time, and they are whole persons. That I think our society, we've really kind of thought about them as brains on sticks. That it's important for them to make cognitive growth, academic achievement, yet we haven't really looked at the other aspects of their development, their social development, their emotional development, their ethical development, and that we have to really look at them as a whole person. And actually, how much do we actually value the development of those young people? I mean, they're an asset, they're a resource. We need to focus funding and activities for them. They've got to have something to do.
Well, one of the points that the book makes, and this is a book that really supports work that has been done by other people, but one of the points that it makes is that the brainwashing was to convince the world and us of our subhumanness. And that may be one of the reasons why we don't invest more, because, you know, when you look at what's going on, for example, in the Congo, Haiti's a wonderful exception to this rule, actually. But when you look at what's going on in the Congo, 6 million black people killed in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, and no one's paying any attention at all. And the other parts of Africa where there's just been incredible loss of life and no attention paid. Haiti, again, a wonderful exception to this rule. But there is a pattern throughout history of just not valuing black life as much as white life. And so we have to, you know, begin to figure out what damage that has caused us as well.
Well, Haiti is a wonderful example just as of late.